Did you know that you can save as much as $600 per year in maintenance costs by using 0W20 oil? But is there a downside? After comparing 50 engines running 0W20 versus 5W30, the answer is yes. These weren't lab tests, but cars driven in gruesome, real-world scenarios. The result? Conclusive proof that manufacturers are lying to you to line their pockets. At the end, I'll share an oil switching trick mechanics use to make their engines last 5 times longer. Section 1. Decoding oil viscosity numbers. Did you know that 60% of drivers unknowingly use the wrong oil? That is why many engines start dying at 100,000 miles, while other people drive the same cars for over 400,000 miles. If you've not been paying attention to the oil weight you use, let me clear up the confusion. The 2 numbers on a bottle measure the oil's viscosity in different situations. The number before W, which stands for winter, measures its viscosity in winter. The number after the dash is the viscosity when the engine is at its optimal operating temperature, typically around 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The viscosity ratings have been established by the Society of Automotive Engineers. They ensure that in cold weather, the oil doesn't freeze or develop wax crystals that can damage your engine. In other words, if you use the wrong weighted oil during winter, your engine can literally freeze, but more on that later. In the case of this video, 0W20 means the oil has a viscosity of 0 in winter and 20 when the engine is at its optimal temperature. The same goes for 5W30. 0W oil is incredibly thin when cold, almost like water. This allows it to heat up quickly so that it can lubricate the engine faster when it's cold. This quick circulation is crucial to prevent metal-on-metal contact and engine damage during cold starts. 0-rated oils can start in temperatures as low as -40 degrees Fahrenheit. 5W is also thin, but not as thin as 0W. This means that it is a fraction slower, which doesn't protect the engine as well. It can start in temperatures as low as -22 degrees Fahrenheit. Similarly, 0W20 oil is also thinner at optimal temperatures, with, you guessed it, a viscosity rating of 20. So, when the engine is running properly or the weather is scorching, the oil will remain thin and flow more freely than the 30-weighted oil. While thin oil is good for a cold engine, it can be problematic for a hot engine, and that's what the 50-engine test confirmed. Section 2. The 50-engine test result, the big trade-off. Over the years, many car manufacturers have conducted independent tests on different oil types. Back in 1999, Honda concluded that 0W20 oil was perfect for its cars, and GM had a similar study over a decade ago. However, an independent laboratory took it upon itself to conduct a painstaking 200,000-mile durability study. These weren't perfect lab conditions. These were real cars subjected to real-world driving cycles. Half of the engines ran exclusively on manufacturer-specified 0W20 full synthetic oil, while the other half used a high-quality 5W30 full synthetic. And yes, the cars were subject to the same maintenance schedules. The test took several years, and the results surprised the engineers overseeing the project. But do you know who wasn't surprised? The mechanics who actually take cars apart for a living and have been using these secrets for themselves. The first thing the test showed was obvious. 0W20 showed better fuel economy. There is an average improvement of about 2.4% of 0.8 miles per gallon. Fuel savings were greater in newer cars, and in cold weather, highway driving also sees average gains of 2.8% versus 1.9% in city driving. In practical terms, it means that drivers can save between $125 and $185 per year using this oil over 5W30. Unfortunately, this is where the good news ends. In long-term use, the 0W20 engines exhibited a staggering 42% higher main and rod bearing wear. There was also 24% more wear on cam lobes and 31% more scoring on cylinder walls. While these figures aren't absolute for all cars, SAE engineers and other experts confirm that these findings are in line with what you'd expect. But it gets worse. There is also 28% more oil consumption by the 150,000-mile mark. That's because thinner oils leak through seals at high temperatures, and they also evaporate quicker than thick oils. While 5W30 oil definitely has lower MPG, it maintains cleaner pistons and provides a more stable protective film under sustained high loads. Wear metal analysis also revealed better results. In short, 0W20 is better for fuel economy, but 5W30 is much better for longevity. While the prospect of saving less than $200 a year is enticing, spending $5,000 on a new engine isn't. If you're wondering why the test was conducted using full synthetic oil and not conventional oil, you need to watch this. 19 synthetic oil secrets mechanics won't share. But save that for later because I'm about to reveal the billion-dollar secret car makers have been hiding from consumers. Section 3. The real reason why automakers prefer 0W20. Did you know that most cars in Europe or Japan run on 5W30, whereas an identical car in the US or Canada would be on 0W20? That should let you know that the decision has nothing to do with mechanics or science, but money. In the United States, the Corporate Average Fuel Economy, or CAFE standards, impose strict penalties on automakers if their overall fleet fuel economy drops below specific targets. In 2024, NHTSA set penalties at $17 per vehicle for each tenth of a mile per gallon that a manufacturer's average fuel economy fell below the applicable standard. As a result, car makers paid cumulative fines of over $1.1 billion for CAFE non-compliance for cars made between 2011 and 2020. By mandating all cars to switch to 0W20 and cutting fuel economy by 2.4%, car makers are able to save millions of dollars. If that's not an incentive to screw over customers, I don't know what is. However, a new bill that took effect in July 2025 has abolished penalties for non-compliance. So, going forward, we can expect car makers to be more honest about their oil recommendations. Still, several manufacturers have already admitted as much. For example, Toyota car manuals recommend using thicker oils in warmer weather or underload. GM engineers also confirmed that they only recommended 0W20 to comply with government regulations. Besides, if your car begins to act weird, manufacturers expect you to upgrade to the newest model. Before then, you would have saved a decent amount on fuel costs. However, it doesn't have to be one or the other. Later in the video, I'll show you a trick mechanics use to maximize both fuel savings and longevity. Before then, let's look at the upside of using thinner oils. Section 4. The science of lubrication. In some ways, choosing the right oil is more important than choosing the right fuel. That's because oil serves 4 critical functions. The first one is lubrication. Oil reduces friction between moving parts, preventing metal-to-metal contact. Modern engines feature 0.001-inch bearing clearances. So, without the film of oil, they'll basically grind against the crankshaft. The same is true for pistons. This friction generates heat and can cause bearings to crack or break under immense stress. Bearing failure costs $3,000 to $7,000 to repair. The second major function of oil is to cool the engine by carrying heat away from critical areas. Excess heat will blow head gaskets and warp cylinder blocks, which also cost thousands to fix. Thirdly, oil cleans the engine by suspending contaminants like soot and sludge. When there's too much sludge, Even an engine flush won't fix it. One poor guy had to spend $8,500 to rebuild the engine of his Infiniti QX60 because he had been using the wrong oil. Finally, oil protects against corrosion and rust. This just might be the worst one because rust won't just destroy the engine, but the entire car. In order for oil to achieve all of these, it must have the right viscosity and additive package. If oil can't maintain integrity under stress, it should not go into your engine. When manufacturers recommend a specific oil like 0W20, they expect it to work perfectly, at least in most situations. Section 5. When to use 0W20. Let's clarify something important. Nobody is saying that 0W20 is bad for your engine. This oil has been engineered to the highest possible specifications. However, to get the most out of this oil, you have to use it in the right conditions. If you live in a cold climate where temperatures frequently drop below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0W20 is a no-brainer. A common saying among mechanics is that 90% of engine damage happens at cold starts. The rapid lubrication of thinner oils offers a significant advantage and will protect your engine better than a 5W oil or higher. You should also use 0W20 if you often drive short commutes under light loads. If you're really stepping on the gas or putting the car through its paces, the engine won't reach its thermal limits. The third category of people who should use these are those who diligently change oil at or before the 5,000-mile mark. At this point, the additives won't have degraded, and the oil is still able to function at an acceptable range. The main danger for 0W20 is when you try to push it to 15,000 miles. That is when oil leakage reaches its peak. Finally, if you drive a modern car designed with extremely tight bearing clearances, 0W20 might be your only option. Many newer cars are built this way. Using a thicker oil in this case will void your warranty. However, there is an exception to the rule, which we'll see in the next section. Section 6. When to avoid 0W20. Despite what manufacturers would have you believe, 0W20 has limits, and if you ignore them, you're looking at a full engine rebuild. The first one is if you drive in high temperatures, desert climates, or regions with hot summers. Not only does this mean that the 0-weighted oil is unnecessary, but the 20-weight oil might also not be sufficient. Oil experts recommend 10W40 or 15W40 for hotter climates. Next, don't use the thinnest oil if you frequently tow, haul heavy loads, or climb mountains. These driving conditions drastically increase engine temperatures and mechanical stress, which requires a more robust oil film. The same applies if you do a lot of aggressive driving. If you often exceed 3,000 RPM, your engine will go through more stress than thin oils can handle. And finally, you have to switch to a thicker viscosity oil once your car reaches 100,000 miles. As engines get older, the internal clearances naturally increase. That is why most manuals recommend switching to 5W30 or thicker at this point. At this point, your warranty also would have ended, so you're free to do whatever is best for your car. As you can see from these scenarios, 0W20 has a kryptonite, and I'm about to explain why. Section 7. Why can't 0W20 handle the heat? A good quality full synthetic 0W20 handles extreme temperatures of between -40 degrees Fahrenheit to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Most car engines function comfortably within these parameters. However, modern cars, especially those with direct injection and turbochargers, have a hidden inferno. I'm referring to the area between the piston rings and the cylinder walls. As combustion gases superheat the oil, localized temperatures can reach as high as 482 degrees Fahrenheit. That is significantly beyond the upper limit of 0W20. This is where 0W20's greatest asset, its thinness, becomes its greatest liability. Once that protective film starts to break down, you'll experience more metal-to-metal contact and evaporation. In some cases, the oil coats onto the hot piston surfaces, which then hinders ring movement and reduces efficiency. At temperatures above 250 degrees Fahrenheit, 5W30 maintains 50% greater film thickness than 0W20. That is why the 50 engine test showed significantly more piston scuffing in engines running 0W20. If you only plan on using your car for about 200,000 miles, this is not a problem. However, if you have dreams of reaching 4, 5, or even 900,000 miles, you need better engine protection. In that case, you should also watch this video. Your engine can last 900,000 miles without repairs. So, what do you do when the recommended oil isn't up to the challenge? That's when you read the fine print in your manual. Section 8. Does switching oil destroy your engine? Back in 2017, Nissan owners in Canada were surprised when dealerships stopped putting 5W30 oil in their cars and switched to 0W20. They claimed that Nissan had instructed them to stop using the oil recommended in their manuals and to switch to the thinner ones. However, what the bulletin actually said was that Nissan recommended but did not require all owners to switch to the thinner oil. As I explained earlier, this ties back to the CAFE legislation. But more importantly, this should end the argument that switching oils is bad for your engine. Just because the oil viscosity number is stamped on the oil filler cap does not mean that it is the only oil you should use. In most car manuals, you will see that the manufacturer has provided a range of different oils you can use. In some cars, you could find everything ranging from 0W20 to 15W40, depending on the temperature where you live. They advise you to change oil based on what the weather will be like at your next oil change. The manual might also state clearly that 5W20 or 5W30 provides better lubrication for towing and other heavy load situations. Toyota, on the other hand, tends to be more limiting with its options. They want you to use 0W20 or 5W20 for most of their cars in any weather. However, the oil recommendations are different for European and Japanese cars. For example, the recommended oil for the GR Supra in North America is 0W20, but in Japan, that oil is 5W30. Same car, same exact specs, but different oils. That means that Toyota acknowledges that unless you're operating in temperatures lower than -26 degrees Fahrenheit, you don't need weighted oil. While you should stick with what your car maker recommends, there is one exception to this rule. Section 9. Why 5W30 is a turbocharger's best friend. 90% of all turbocharger failures are related to oil. Oil starvation, contamination, and poor quality oil are the main culprits. Turbos are more sensitive to oil failure than other cars because of the amount of heat they generate. Turbochargers spin at incredibly high speeds of between 150,000 to 250,000 RPMs. Exhaust gas temperatures reach over 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit in gasoline engines. Internal components can exceed 930 degrees Fahrenheit. This is more than double the recommended threshold for 0W20. The intense temperature causes oil to lose viscosity, and the additives begin to degrade. Not to mention that the oil might also begin to evaporate. Another nightmare scenario is when the oil cooks and carbonizes, which damages the turbo's internal components. While your manual might say that you should use 0W20 for your turbo, this is one instance where you can ignore it. Lab tests prove that 5W30 reduces high temperature wear by 22% compared to 0W20 under severe service conditions. 5W30 also provides 45% greater film thickness in high temperatures, which will protect your turbo bearings. That can save you between $4,000 to $8,000. However, if your car is under warranty and the manual insists on only 0W20, you have to use it. But if you have the option to use a thicker oil, which most cars do, go for it. Now that we've seen what car makers recommend and the engine test results, it's time for the bonus section I promised: how to choose the right oil for your car. The mechanic's secret. The conclusion of the test performed on the 50 engines is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. One oil isn't necessarily better than the other. The same goes for other weighted oils like 0W30, which provides a blend of both. The best approach, which is what mechanics have been doing for decades, is to match the oil's viscosity to how and what you drive. Here is how mechanics and you should choose the right oil. Number 1. Check your owner's manual thoroughly. Don't just look at the number printed on the oil filler cap. Read the manual and look at the fine print. If your manual insists on 0W20, stick with it until you reach 100,000 miles or your warranty ends. However, most cars will provide a list of acceptable or preferred oils for heavy-duty use, hot climates, and towing. If your manual recommends a thicker oil for better longevity, go for it. This might cost you between 1.9% and 3.1% in fuel economy, but it's cheaper than a new engine. Number 2, match the oil to your climate. Here's a fun fact. Drivers in the Middle East don't use 0W or even 5W oils. As they never have winter, their cars use 10W40 or 15W40. And yes, their cars can run for hundreds of thousands of miles. Mechanics use a similar method here in the States. During winter, use 0W20 or 0W30. But when it's summer, switch to 5W30. If the weather is warmer and you also do aggressive driving, use 10W30 or 5W40. Number 3, look for industry certifications. Did you know that the API service classification is just as important as the SAE viscosity rating? If you drive a modern gasoline direct injection and turbocharged gasoline direct injection, you need to be using APISP/I LSA CGF6 certified oil. Introduced in 2020, GF6 oil provides better wear protection, fuel economy, and leaves cleaner pistons. While this oil is backward compatible, you shouldn't use older classifications on newer engines. Make sure whatever oil you buy has the right API and SAE specs for your car. Once the oil is certified, it doesn't matter if it's a cheap brand or an expensive one, it will work right. Number 4, use full synthetic oil. Here's another fun fact for you. Quality full synthetic 0W20 provides better protection than conventional 5W30, even in turbos. Full synthetic oil maintains its additive and protective properties better than conventional or synthetic blends over time. Some people say that synthetic oils should only be used for longer service intervals. Not true. I recommend full synthetic oil or 5,000-mile changes, or every 6 months. Number 5, switch to high-mileage oils when needed. High-mileage oils have additives that condition seals and improve lubrication. This makes them ideal for engines that have passed the 75,000-mile mark. However, if your engine has lasted even twice as long and shows no sign of leaks, you don't need it. Stick with your regular full synthetic oil, and you'll be fine. There you have it, an end to the 0W20 and 5W30 debate. But if you think choosing the right oil is all your engine needs, you're mistaken. If you really want your car to last, you have to invest in the right additives. And here's where to start. 13 engine additives that work and 5 that'll kill your car.